Hello, welcome to the pod. Today we're talking with Matt Gattozzi, a fellow agency owner whose company Goodo Studios creates videos and photo content for DTC brands. Welcome to the Activate Your Audience podcast, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, brother. So let's jump right into it. I wanted to just riff a little bit on, some of the content principles, some of your experience with what you do. I wanted to maybe start with brand story. Could you kind of go into how you apply maybe some brand story principles with the work that you do, and maybe any advice that our listeners could take away to consider with aligning their content creation with their brand story?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that even though you're a company, you should see yourself almost like a human connecting with another human. And content allows you to do that at scale, but you want to think about it almost like a one-on-one relationship. And if you were talking about your product to a person one-on-one, you might start talking like them. You might start giving them examples or references that they understand as well. And that might change from person to person. So I say that because what's really important is to actually understand your customer first and understand who is buying, but also why they're buying, because that will actually position your brand and messaging in a certain way. So if you are trying to reach a mom who lives in Iowa, who's 45 years old, that's a very different language and conversation than you're going to have compared to somebody that might be a young mom who lives in San Francisco. So you have to understand who your customer is and why they would buy from you. And that really helps build the brand positioning and messaging. For us, that's how we start everything. We start with understanding the customer, the creative strategy. Yeah. Because when we create the photos and the videos, when we are creating that content, it should be driven with the understanding of who that customer is versus being like, oh, we're going to create this awesome, cool video and then just slam it into a marketing campaign and hope that it works. And I think a lot of traditional production operates in that way. They care more about what their cameras are, the cool shots, the storyboarding, all this stuff that, although important to understand and know, is not the reason why somebody actually buys from this brand. And so we are really trying to understand the customer first and then create content that speaks to those people, that makes, looks like them, feels like them, speaks like them, and actually connects with them.
Yeah, so it sounds like resonance, right, from a couple angles is key. One, as you mentioned, the actual content is speaking to a specific avatar. We know this, it's cliche, but as cliche as it is, people forget that. Brands forget that. And creators, whether it's us here doing a podcast or you shooting content or any of our social media campaigns, it's easy to fall into the trap, I think, of not only just forgetting who the avatar is, but also not delivering, I guess, the quality over the, how would you call it? It's not even quantity, but it's more of substance versus substance of what you're doing. And you can't really tap into that, whether it's us, with our clients, B2B, or our clients to their direct consumer customers, right? So it's almost like we all at every level have to tap into who are we speaking to and make sure that that's aligned more than our own specific biases or goals. So that's a major point, man.
Yeah, and I think too that, when we think about creating content, a lot of times people are thinking about the what. When should I post? Where should I post? How often should I post? And they take these, pieces of content that's online from these social media gurus or marketing people. Yeah. And they're like, well, this person told me I need to post 3 times a day. So I'm going to post 3 times a day. And then they're frustrated when it doesn't work out. And it's like, yeah, because the reason why it works is not because you posted 3 times a day. It's because the content that you're creating, the why behind it, is what resonates with your consumer. And if you're focused on the what, then you're not really thinking about, is this really what my customer wants? Is this really what the consumer, the end person, wants to experience? you probably will realize that it's not about the quantity. It's not about that what. Usually it's like creating something that's meaningful. And I think in a world where there is so much noise, more is not the way to cut through the noise. It's the quality. It's about the depth, and that lacks a lot. And I think that that's something that if you can understand what that depth means for your audience, which is different for each person, and how that manifests itself, because that can be different. Should you be on TikTok or YouTube? I can't really say necessarily, but understanding your why and understanding how that connects to the customer or consumer, then everything else will fall into place. Your content calendar will fall into place. But first, think about the why versus the what.
Yeah. And I think, as say, whether it's a small business or an established team, a larger firm, people get overwhelmed with following the latest trends, trying to chase the algorithm. And that's, again, a cycle that we've spoken on with other guests on previous episodes about just this machine that we are all not, we're going to fall into the traps of that kind of like cycle, because that's how these systems are built. Not just for the end consumer as a user of these like platforms, but also us as creators, as marketers. So that's an important thing where even, we were talking the other day, the behemoths of like, say, an Instagram that's saying, oh, like we're going to go back to our fundamentals because we try to chase the, competitors' whole quick videos and these kind of things that, again, were trending, they work, but for the longevity of their brand and their offering, it didn't seem to really align to who their avatar was. So now they're going back to, first principles, so to speak. And so with that being said, like, as you mentioned, the consistency, a lot of it is that full circle. Stop trying to chase the hacks, right? Stop trying to make this specific thing or just follow what somebody else you said, because you said it pointingly. Like, nobody can really tell you specifically what your strategy or your times and all that is. You have to figure that out. It depends on your avatar, and it also obviously depends on resources and capacities, but the consistency is key there. So let's spring in line with that. Do you have some sort of maybe like checklist or any like best approaches for how to maybe, again, not giving anybody a formula because everybody has to figure theirs out, but of just social media best practices for a consistent communication campaign?
Yeah, I definitely think the first thing is understanding the capacity of your team. So understanding who's in charge of each item to get it from ideation to publish.
Okay.
And I think a lot of times people don't really have a clear organizational chart and not clear rules. And as you grow, those rules change and they're not as defined as when you first put out that job description and hired.
Right.
And you have to adapt. So I think the first step that I look as I'm helping with brands is, what are they in charge of? What are we in charge of? But even when I consult with other companies, the first thing I'm looking at is who's in the room, and do all these people need to be in the room? Is more actually hurting them? So organizational chart is really important, because once you understand who's in charge of what, you understand the capacity. So then you create realistic expectations of what can be created on a weekly basis and what can be published on a weekly basis. Then from there, I would say, okay, now we can, post X, Y, and Z every single week. We're going to, focus on, this platform. And then how can we take this one piece of content and distribute it to other platforms?
Right.
Then I think about, okay, what are the core messages or content pillars that we can create to help us with the ideation process? Content pillars are good because an idea will either fit in it and you'll be like, okay, cool, we'll do that because it fits within the pillar, but also there creates exclusions. So instead of it being like, oh, you could create anything about anything, it's like, no, we can only create around these 3 to 5 content pillars. That helps you hone in with your ideation process, which makes it a little bit faster. And then the last part of the checklist in terms of creation is, especially if you are limited in resources of time, not only just money, but time, then you want to focus on putting time constraints on creation. So what I say is that if when you're running, when you first start running, how far you can go in 10 minutes is, let's say, a mile. But as you get better at running, you might be able to run a mile and a half in that same time.
Right.
So the goal is, how can you just get your reps in terms of time? And then over time, you'll become more efficient and produce more. So I like to say, keep a time constraint on your creation process. So let's say you need to make 5 videos this week, one every day, short form video, talking business. Give yourself 15 minutes to create one video. How good that video is in 15 minutes may not be as good as it will be a month from now, but at least you're showing up, and that's where you tie that back into the consistency factor. Okay, now I've got time. I'm spending 15 minutes per video, times that by 5. That's an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, you'll get more done a few months from now in that hour and 15 minutes, but you keep it consistent. And that's really organizationally how I would go about creating consistent content and thinking about it. And that's like a good little checklist to really get you started.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. And with one of those points when you mentioned the principles, just dive in a little bit deeper on that. If we're looking at, again, the constraints of creativity, if you have, I guess, maybe personally with how you, either for your business or for your clients' businesses, how would you, I guess, set constraints for yourself, right? Besides the ones that are implemented with time, with budget, are there any ones that you recommend, or any kind of, I don't know, philosophies or best practices for setting those constraints that you'd like to speak to?
Yeah, I think when it comes to building out like content pillars, I like to focus on how can we educate them? How can we show off like something greater, like the lifestyle or the kind of more vertical? So for example, if you're like a health product that does something specific, is there, a greater lifestyle around this product that you could maybe speak to that could be more top of funnel? So education, kind of lifestyle, or whatever the vertical of the business is. And then some sort of entertainment. Now, entertainment doesn't mean you need to be doing dances and things like that, but is there, something that's a little bit more fun, or a more fun component to the business? So for example, even if you're doing a restaurant, it's like, not everything has to be like, okay, this is our food, this is what we're doing, but it's like, can you show off an event and a party or something like that? If it's a product, can you just show, for example, if it's a candle, you could do education on candle care. You could talk about candles, scents, things like that holistically, educationally, I guess, the lifestyle. And then for fun, you could do really interesting videos about showing off home decor with the candle and things like that. And so you can see that now we've layered on a lot of different pillars pretty quickly. Those are 3 umbrellas that I would look into. And then I would say try to find maybe 3 to 5 subjects within those umbrellas that you could like pick as your content pillars. And that's really what we do when we're working with clients, especially on the organic side.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. No, I think those are perfect principles to, as at any level that you're at of content creation, to really, I think, hone in. And as you said, get the most out of those. And you could, tree branch out of each one of those depending on how far you want to go into it. So I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. So to wrap it up, and let me know if I'm missing anything. You said first, from just maintaining consistency, right? Figuring out your pace and having some sort of showing up, as we know, is the best practice oftentimes. Placing your avatar first goes aligned with that, right? So we want to show up and we want to speak to the specific individual that our brand connects to. And then the second bit, we talked about, what are the best practices for a communication campaign. You mentioned the capacity in your organizational chart. Figure out that the people in the room, that the responsibilities, the stakeholders, the owners are in play and not either crowding or lacking or unrealistically setting expectations, right? Then you went on to leverage, right? Like how to repurpose the content and make it something that is going to get your best output for the input you put into it. And I want to say maybe like a mix of like Parkinson's law, right? And set constraints in the creative process, which things will, amplify or shrink to the amount of time and effort you give them. So setting, like you said, those constraints both in time as well as within working budgets, realities of the world, to just have that, again, be a disciplined execution process. Did I get that right? Would you want to add anything else to that?
I think that was all great. I think the biggest thing is that a lot of times people think we need to do more, or we need to get more people, or, oh, if I only had this or that, versus extracting the value in the resources that they already have or the team members they already have. Most likely it's a organization thing. Like either they don't have an organized system in place, or the organizational chart is not as clear. So sometimes it's systems, sometimes it's the actual employees and things like that. It's like you don't get rid of them, but are we activating them in the correct way? And that's also true if you're working with somebody from the outside. Like, are you activating your outside agencies or freelancers in the correct way? So that's the biggest thing that I'd love for people to take away from this.
That's huge, brother. Thank you so much. Yeah, to tie a ribbon on it all, as we say, is, we're activating our audiences, and through the process, we have to activate ourselves as an individual. And as you mentioned, you have to activate the people within their organizations and partners. So beautifully put. Where can people learn more about you or support your work or whatever you are focused on right now?
Yeah, so you can check out goodostudios.com. That's a Goodo studios.com. I'm most active on Twitter and LinkedIn, so you can just search my name, Matthew Gattozzi, and I'll be there. Feel free to drop a follow, and I have a weekly newsletter that comes out every Thursday that you'll be able to find somewhere there and sign up, because I give a lot of good breakdowns on how to create content and good systems building. So if that's something you guys are looking for, that's a really great newsletter that comes out every week.
Yes, highly recommend that. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and we hope to have you back on the pod.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Cheers, brother.